What happens when two powerhouse country music icons clash on live television and years of buried professional rivalry finally explodes into the most uncomfortable interview in daytime talk show history? The tension in Studio 6B was so thick you could cut it with a knife. And what started as a routine promotional appearance quickly spiraled into a career-defining moment that left audiences speechless, and Blake Shelton walking off set in fury. Before we dive into this explosive confrontation, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think really triggered this heated exchange. Trust me, you're going to want to hear every single word of this unbelievable showdown. The Kelly Clarkson Show had always prided itself on being the friendliest, most welcoming talk show on television. Kelly's genuine warmth and infectious laugh had made celebrities feel comfortable enough to share their most personal stories. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, something felt different from the moment Blake Shelton walked through those studio doors. Kelly had been sitting in her makeup chair, going over her interview notes with her producer Sarah, when she noticed the unusual tension in the air. "Is Blake okay?" she asked, glancing toward the green room where her longtime friend and fellow coach from The Voice was supposed to be relaxing before his segment. Sarah shrugged, mentioning that Blake's team had been unusually quiet and that he'd declined the usual pre-show chat they always shared. When the cameras started rolling, Kelly's signature bright smile was in full force as she introduced her guest. "Please welcome my dear friend, someone who never fails to make me laugh until my sides hurt, the one and only Blake Shelton." The audience erupted in applause, but eagle-eyed viewers would later notice that Blake's usual cocky grin seemed forced, and his wave to the crowd lacked its typical enthusiasm. "Blake, it's so good to see you," Kelly said as he settled into the guest chair, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that had made her America's sweetheart. "I feel like we never get to really talk anymore since you left The Voice. I miss having you right there next to me." Blake's response was cooler than usual. "Yeah, well, things change, don't they, Kelly? Sometimes people move on to bigger and better things." The comment hung in the air for a moment, and Kelly's smile faltered slightly. She'd known Blake for over a decade, and she could read the subtle edge in his voice that most people would miss. "Absolutely. And speaking of moving on, let's talk about your new album. I've been listening to it nonstop, and I have to say, some of these songs feel really personal. There's one track in particular, Bridges Burned, that really caught my attention." Kelly leaned forward slightly, her interviewer instincts kicking in. "It sounds like you might be working through some pretty heavy stuff. Want to tell us about that?" Blake's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You know, Kelly, I think sometimes people read too much into songs. Sometimes a song is just a song. Not everything has to have some deep hidden meaning behind it." His tone was measured, but there was an unmistakable defensiveness creeping in. Kelly wasn't backing down. "Come on, Blake. I'm a songwriter too. I know when lyrics come from a real place. Some folks smile right to your face, then stab you in the back without a trace. That's pretty specific imagery right there." The studio audience was beginning to sense something was off. The usual banter between these two friends felt strained, like watching a married couple having an argument at a dinner party. Blake shifted in his chair, his hands gripping the armrests a little tighter than necessary. "Kelly, I think you're overthinking this. Maybe we should stick to talking about the music and leave the amateur psychology to the professionals." The words came out sharper than intended, and Kelly's eyes widened slightly. In all their years of friendship, Blake had never spoken to her with such barely concealed irritation. "Okay, fair enough," Kelly said, trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "Let's talk about your tour then. I heard you're doing some really intimate venues this time around. Getting back to your roots. That must be exciting after all those huge stadium shows." Blake let out a bitter laugh. "Yeah, intimate venues. That's one way to put it, though. I guess when your former friends decide they're too good to return your calls, you learn to appreciate the people who actually show up for you." The comment landed like a bomb in the studio. Kelly's face went pale, and for a moment, the confident talk show host looked genuinely hurt. "Blake, what are you talking about? I always return your calls. We literally texted about this appearance last week." "Did we though, Kelly? Because I seem to remember reaching out to you about 3 months ago when I was going through that rough patch with the divorce, and I got radio silence. But then I see you on Instagram posting about your girls' night with Miranda." Blake's voice was rising now, and the audience was dead silent, sensing they were witnessing something that probably shouldn't be happening on live television. Kelly's mouth opened in shock. "Blake, I never got any call from you 3 months ago. I swear to you, If you had reached out to me about something that's serious, I would have been there in a heartbeat. You know that. Do I know that? Blake stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been pretty selective about which friendships are worth maintaining. Funny how you always have time for the people who can do something for your career, but when someone's just looking for a friend, suddenly you're too busy. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of this unexpected meltdown. Kelly's producer was frantically gesturing from the sidelines, but Kelly ignored him, her focus entirely on Blake. That is not fair, and you know it. I have never, ever chosen career over friendship. If there was a miscommunication, then let's figure out what happened. But don't you dare question my loyalty to the people I care about. Blake was pacing now, his hands running through his hair in frustration. Miscommunication? Kelly, I called you crying at 2 o'clock in the morning when everything was falling apart. I left you a voicemail that was probably 10 minutes long, spilling my guts about how lost I felt. And nothing, not a call back, not a text, nothing. But then 2 weeks later, you're on some podcast talking about how important it is to be there for your friends during their darkest moments. The hypocrisy was unreal. Kelly's eyes were filling with tears now, and she was shaking her head vigorously. Blake, I never got that voicemail. I swear on my children's lives. I never got it. Something must have happened with my phone. Or maybe it went to the wrong number. But I would never, ever ignore you when you needed me. You have to believe me. The studio was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The audience was transfixed, watching this deeply personal moment unfold between two people they'd grown to love over the years. Blake stopped pacing and turned to face Kelly, his eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and anger. You really expect me to believe that? Blake's voice was low and dangerous now. That it was just some technical glitch that kept you from getting the most important call I've ever made? Come on, Kelly. At least have the decency to own up to it instead of making up some story about phone problems. Kelly wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, her voice breaking slightly. I'm not making anything up, Blake. I'm telling you the truth, and the fact that you think I would lie about something like this tells me you don't know me at all. The confrontation was reaching a boiling point, and everyone in the studio could feel it. Blake's face was red with anger, and Kelly looked like she was barely holding herself together. The friendly interview had transformed into something much more raw and painful, with years of misunderstanding and hurt feelings pouring out in front of a live audience. You know what, Kelly? Blake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't know you at all. Maybe I never did. The words hung in the air like a slap across the face. Kelly's composure finally cracked completely, and she stood up from her chair, her hands shaking with emotion. How dare you? She whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with raw pain. How dare you stand there and act like I'm the villain in this story when you won't even give me the benefit of the doubt? Blake crossed his arms, his stance defiant. The benefit of the doubt? Kelly, I gave you that for 3 months. I made excuses for you. I told myself you were probably just busy, that you'd call back when you had time. But when I saw you laughing it up with Miranda at that industry party, posting pictures like you didn't have a care in the world, I realized the truth. I just wasn't important enough to warrant a response. Stop it, Kelly said, her voice growing stronger. Stop making this about Miranda. This has nothing to do with her, and you know it. You're being cruel and unfair, and it's not like you at all. Blake let out a harsh laugh. Not like me, Kelly? You don't get to decide what's like me and what isn't. You lost that right when you decided our friendship was disposable. The audience was squirming in their seats, many of them looking like they wanted to leave, but couldn't tear their eyes away from the train wreck unfolding before them. Kelly's producer was making frantic hand signals, trying to get her attention. But she was locked in this battle of wills with Blake. Our friendship was never disposable to me, Kelly said, her voice cracking. Never. You were one of the first people to really believe in me when I was starting out. You gave me advice. You made me laugh when I wanted to cry. You were there for me during some of the worst moments of my life. Do you really think I would throw all of that away? Blake's expression softened for just a moment, but then his walls went back up. I don't know, Kelly. People change. Success changes people. Maybe you just outgrew the friendship. That's not what happened and you know it, Kelly shot back. You're so convinced that I deliberately ignored you that you won't even consider that maybe, just maybe, there's another explanation. When did you become so cynical? When did you start assuming the worst about people who care about you? Blake took a step closer to Kelly, his voice dropping to an angry whisper. I became cynical when the person I trusted most left me hanging when I needed them. Do you have any idea what I was going through? Do you have any idea how dark things got for me? Kelly's face crumpled. Then tell me now. Tell me what happened, because I clearly missed something important, and I need to understand. Blake ran his hands through his hair, struggling with whether to open up or keep his walls firmly in place. It doesn't matter now. The moment's past. You can't fix it with a conversation on your talk show. The hell I can't, Kelly said, surprising everyone with a steel in her voice. You came on my show. You brought this up, and now you're going to explain to me what I supposedly did wrong, because I'm not going to let you walk out of here thinking I'm the kind of person who abandons her friends. Blake stared at her for a long moment, and the studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Finally, he spoke, his voice heavy with emotion. I called you the night I found out about the affair, when I discovered that everything I thought I knew about my marriage was a lie. I was sitting in my truck in some random parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I was falling apart. I needed to hear a friendly voice, someone who would remind me that I wasn't completely alone in the world. Kelly's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes widening in horror. Blake, I had no idea. I swear to you, I never got that call. I poured my heart out to your voicemail, Kelly. I told you things I haven't told anyone else. I was vulnerable in a way that scared me. And when you didn't call back, it felt like the final rejection. Like even my closest friends had limits to how much of my mess they were willing to deal with. Tears were streaming down Kelly's. Faced him now. I would never have limits on helping you. Never. You have to believe me when I tell you that I never got that message. Something happened, some technical problem, something, but I never heard it. Blake's anger was starting to give way to exhaustion. It doesn't matter now, Kelly. The damage is done. I can't unknow what it felt like to be ignored when I was at my lowest point. But it does matter, Kelly insisted. It matters because you're judging me for something I didn't do. You're ending our friendship over a misunderstanding. Blake shook his head. It's not just about the phone call, Kelly. It's about the pattern. You've been distant for months. We used to text all the time. We used to make plans. We used to be real friends. But then you got your show and your new life. And suddenly I felt like I was bothering you whenever I reached out. Kelly looked stunned. That's not true. I've been overwhelmed, yes, but I never meant to make you feel like you were bothering me. Why didn't you tell me you felt that way? Because I shouldn't have to beg for someone's attention, Blake said quietly. If you wanted to maintain the friendship, you would have made the effort. The fact that you didn't told me everything I needed to know about where I stood in your life. Kelly was quiet for a moment, processing his words. When she spoke again, her voice was soft and filled with regret. I'm so sorry, Blake. I had no idea you felt like that. I thought we were fine. I thought we were just both busy living our lives, but that we'd always be there for each other when it mattered. Well, you weren't there when it mattered most, Blake said. And the pain in his voice was unmistakable. And I can't pretend that didn't change something fundamental between us. The studio audience was completely silent, many of them visibly moved by the raw emotion playing out in front of them. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was two people working through real pain and betrayal. Kelly took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. So, what do we do now? Do we just throw away years of friendship because of a misunderstanding? Because that's what this is, Blake. A terrible, hurtful misunderstanding. Blake looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time since the interview started, his expression wasn't angry. It was just sad. I don't know, Kelly. I honestly don't know. Some things can't be fixed, even when both people want them to be. I refuse to accept that, Kelly said firmly. I refuse to believe that our friendship means so little that one missed call, one terrible miscommunication can destroy it completely. Blake's voice was barely above a whisper. It wasn't just one call, Kelly. It was the call that mattered most, and the silence that followed it changed everything for me. Kelly reached out her hand toward him, but he stepped back. Don't, he said quietly. Don't try to fix this with gestures. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal, even when they're accidental. So that's it, Kelly asked, her voice breaking. You're just going to walk away? You're going to let this misunderstanding destroy everything we've built together. Blake looked at her one last time, and the pain in his eyes was almost unbearable to witness. I'm not walking away from what we built, Kelly. I'm walking away from what we became. The weight of Blake's words settled over the studio like a heavy blanket. Kelly stood frozen, watching as the man she'd considered one of her dearest friends prepared to walk away from everything they'd shared. But something inside her snapped, and she wasn't about to let him leave without fighting for their friendship one last time. "No," Kelly said, her voice suddenly strong and commanding. "You don't get to do this. You don't get to make me the villain in your story and then walk away feeling righteous about it." Blake stopped mid-step, turning back to face her with surprise. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that you've spent this entire conversation attacking me for something I didn't do while completely ignoring your own role in this mess," Kelly said, her voice rising with each word. "You want to talk about patterns? Let's talk about patterns, Blake." The audience leaned forward, sensing that Kelly was about to turn the tables on this confrontation. Blake's eyebrows furrowed, clearly not expecting this shift in the conversation. "What pattern would that be, Kelly?" Kelly took a step toward him, her eyes blazing. "The pattern of you shutting people out the moment you feel hurt instead of actually communicating like an adult. The pattern of you making assumptions about people's motivations instead of giving them a chance to explain. The pattern of you being so wrapped up in your own pain that you can't see past it." Blake's face darkened. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Kelly shot back. "You said you called me once 3 months ago, and when I didn't call back, you decided our entire friendship was over. Did you try calling again? Did you send a text? Did you show up at my house? Did you do anything other than sit there and feel sorry for yourself?" Blake opened his mouth to respond, but Kelly wasn't finished. "And another thing, you mentioned seeing me with Miranda at that party. Did you come over and talk to me? Did you pull me aside and ask why I hadn't returned your call? Or did you just stand there across the room making judgments about what you thought you were seeing?" The studio was electric with tension. Blake's confident demeanor was starting to crack as Kelly's words hit their mark. "I shouldn't have to chase down my friends to get their attention," he said. But his voice lacked its earlier conviction. "No, you shouldn't," Kelly agreed. "But you also shouldn't assume the worst about people who care about you. You're so convinced that I betrayed you that you won't even consider that maybe you contributed to this mess, too." Blake's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "So now this is my fault. I'm the one who got hurt, Kelly. I'm the one who was ignored when I needed help. And I'm sorry about that," Kelly said, her voice softening slightly. "I'm genuinely sorry that you went through that pain and felt like you had no one to turn to. But I'm not sorry for something I didn't do, and I'm not going to let you blame me for your inability to handle conflict like a grown man." Blake took a step toward her, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You want to talk about handling conflict? Let's talk about how you've spent the last 10 minutes making excuses instead of taking responsibility." "Responsibility for what?" Kelly exploded. "For not receiving a phone call? For not being psychic enough to know you were in pain? For living my life while you were busy writing me off as a bad friend?" Blake's composure finally shattered completely. "You want to know what responsibility looks like? It looks like admitting that you've been a terrible friend for months. It looks like acknowledging that you've been so caught up in your own success that you forgot about the people who were there for you before you made it big." Kelly's face went white with rage. "How dare you throw my success in my face like it's something to be ashamed of? I worked my ass off for everything I have, and I never forgot where I came from or who supported me along the way." "Really?" Blake sneered. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you got your big break and decided the rest of us weren't worth your time anymore." "That's a lie and you know it," Kelly shot back. "I've never been anything but grateful for my success, and I've never treated anyone differently because of it. The fact that you would even suggest that shows me you don't know me at all." Blake laughed bitterly. "There it is again. Every time I try to tell you how your actions affected me, you turn it around and make it about how I don't understand you. Maybe the problem isn't that I don't know you, Kelly. Maybe the problem is that I know you too well." The words hit Kelly like a physical blow. She stared at Blake for a long moment, her chest rising and falling as she fought to control her emotions. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly quiet. "Get out." Blake blinked, taken aback by the sudden shift in her tone. "What?" "I said, get out," Kelly repeated, her voice growing stronger. "Get out of my studio. Get off my show and get out of my life. If that's really what you think of me, if you really believe I'm the kind of person who would use people and then discard them, then you don't deserve to be in my life." Blake stood there for a moment, clearly not expecting this turn of events. "Kelly, I know." Kelly cut him off. "You've said enough. You've made your position crystal clear. You think I'm a user, a fake friend, someone who forgets where she came from. Well, congratulations, Blake. You've successfully burned this bridge to the ground." Blake's face went pale as the reality of what was happening started to sink in. "Kelly, wait. Don't, Kelly said, holding up her hand. Don't you dare try to backtrack now. You came on my show. You attacked my character. You questioned my integrity. And you made it clear that you think I'm a terrible person. So own it. Walk out of here knowing that you got exactly what you came for. The studio was dead silent, except for the sound of cameras still rolling. Blake looked around at the sea of shocked faces staring back at him, then back at Kelly, who was standing tall despite the tears streaming down her face. This isn't how I wanted this to go, Blake said quietly. But it's how it went, Kelly replied, her voice steady despite her obvious pain. Actions have consequences, Blake. Words have power. And you just used yours to destroy something that meant everything to me. Blake took one last look at Kelly, opened his mouth as if to say something else, then thought better of it. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the studio exit, his footsteps echoing in the uncomfortable silence. As the studio doors closed behind him, Kelly stood alone on her stage, facing an audience that had just witnessed one of the most brutal public endings of a friendship in television history. She wiped her eyes, took a deep breath, and somehow managed to find her voice. Well, she said, attempting a weak smile. That wasn't exactly what we had planned for today's show. The audience gave her a sympathetic round of applause, but Kelly barely heard it. She was staring at the empty chair where Blake had been sitting, wondering how a friendship that had once meant everything to both of them had just exploded so spectacularly in front of millions of viewers. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the aftermath. But Kelly's mind was elsewhere, replaying every word of the confrontation, and wondering if there was anything she could have said or done differently to prevent this devastating ending. What started as a routine interview had become a masterclass in how quickly relationships can unravel when pain, pride, and misunderstanding collide in the most public way possible. So, what do you think? Was Blake justified in his anger, or did Kelly have every right to defend herself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more explosive celebrity stories that you won't see anywhere else.